Hello, I'm Dominic Hobson, co-founder of Future of Finance. My guest today is Rob Rosenthal, a former Goldman Sachs investment banker who is now CEO of Revolution Populi, a blockchain-enabled database whose mission is to restore the ownership of data to the people who created it, namely citizens and consumers. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, Rob, the clue to your intent at Revolution Populi is clearly in the name of the organization. What does returning data sovereignty to the people mean? And I'm asking that question in two senses, really. One is philosophical, one is practical.
Great question. So why don't we start with what the internet was designed to do and what it was not designed to do, okay? It was designed for traffic. It was designed for traffic of data and information, and that's it. I'm old enough to remember the phrase information superhighway. But there was no similarly decentralized database to capture the data that went across it. So a couple of clever people came along and figured out a way to essentially get us all to hand them over our data, right? It was a bit of a head fake, but that's what they did. And they captured it in their databases. They package it and they sell it. And along with that, unfortunately, they also happen to have a dossier or get a dossier in each and every person that actually uses their services and get to control information dissemination for pretty much the entire world. So this we saw as a bit of a problem, right? A problem societally and just in general, a problem that was ripe for disruption and should be disrupted. The question was how to do it. And, you know, we kind of determined that the solution was available. And that is through a decentralized and universally distributed database with user control. And the technology was available in the form of blockchain. So philosophically, we thought it was essential for somebody to try and do it. And practically, we saw it as achievable. So we're doing it.
Now, you've also described data as the biggest natural resource since oil, which kind of explains why large corporations of the type you've just described are very eager to control it. How exactly are consumers going to wrest control from the likes of Facebook, Google, and Microsoft?
Well, first of all, they need a choice, or rather many choices, to be honest with you. You know, if all we know are these giant companies that take our data, package it, sell it, and control all public discourse across the world, and there's no alternative, then that's all we know, right? However, if you give people an alternative, if you build the technology to do that, we're pretty confident that they'll choose, at least they'll have an opportunity to choose another path, okay? Which, by the way, is the kind of basis for what we're calling, and it's a pet name, it's not an official name, but what we're calling the Facebook Killer Kit, okay? So right now, you know, we're designing and are certainly looking to implement an open source SDK, which is a software development kit, that would be compatible with the blockchain that, you know, we're shepherding into development, which would allow any developer the world over to mix and match different features of a social net, and all of the underlying data would be portable between them. So if you have if you develop a social net, your next door neighbor develops a social net, and I'm a user, and, you know, let's say I try yours and I try theirs, and I don't like what you're doing, I just port the data that I've put on yours over to theirs. And so it's sort of like a death by 1,000 paper cuts, so to speak, rather than just saying, oh, you know, we're going to create this new social net and it's going to have this amazing new feature and we're just going to displace Facebook. Because the problem with that is that if you are even successful, which is hard enough, you kind of become the new power, right? And absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you develop a core database, a very simple, elegant core database that is universally distributed and decentralized with user controls, you know, we really honestly see that as a silver bullet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm interested in the pragmatic approach you're taking, the death by 1,000 cuts, as it were. But I wonder if offering a choice is going to be enough. The usual way of dealing with a monopoly or an oligopoly is, of course, antitrust. But if you look back historically, that has a pretty mixed record, and trusts seem to have an amazing ability to resurrect themselves. So what makes you confident that offering this choice and offering commercial incentives to use it and allowing competition to take place between what's there and what you're proposing, what makes you confident that that will be enough to do the job?
Well, I think that, okay, so first of all, you're absolutely right. I think, antitrust has a bit of a mixed record. And if you think about it, it's almost always, if not always, free market commercial incentives that do disrupt and do displace. Now, often enough, or not often enough, but sometimes they are actually bumped forward as a result of certain government actions to, limit some of the potential rapacious behavior of companies. So, clearly there's a place for antitrust, but it really always is going to come down to, freedom of choice and the ability for new entrants to come in, and the ability for people to actually design and take the risk and develop and put forward the money and the time and the effort in their lives toward doing something new and different that will be disruptive, right? And the technology is available for such a thing. So I think the free market can and ultimately will do it. And again, what antitrust really is about is to just allow for more competition. People still have to step in and do it. Mm-hmm. And so if the technology is available for such a thing, which is blockchain technology, then I'm pretty confident that it's going to get done. Now, this technology is really pretty stunning of an advancement. Blockchain technology can pretty much take any of the middleware services that allow for the entire internet economy to exist and decentralize them. All right, whether it's a database or storage or servers or secure transmissions or any of it, it's a pretty amazing thing. And through cryptocurrency, it actually can be self-maintained and self-sustained. That's really, that construct, okay, is really revolutionary. And so if it's applied in a way that is for and of the public interest, it can have a powerful effect, and that can actually be a solution for the whole problem. We are absolutely confident that it can be.
Mm-hmm. So antitrust can help, but you're really relying on a mixture of technology and cryptocurrency to lower the barriers to entry, as it were. Can you be more specific about exactly what obstacles, what barriers to entry need to be cleared, and indeed what new structures you need to build before this vision, which is a very clear vision, can be realized?
Sure. Well, I mean, right now, because it's still a fairly nascent technology and a fairly nascent kind of global structure, it's the barriers to entry are pretty low, which is fantastic. It also low barriers to entry from a regulatory standpoint is sometimes not good. Okay, but in this circumstance right now, I think it kind of is, right? There's the core blockchain, which we believe will be pioneering because it's meant for practical use. Okay. This is not a sort of cult of personality project. This is meant for practical use, right? And it's being put in place for the public interest. And of course, certain services are going to have to be built on top of it and be compatible with it. But we're working hard on that right now. And as far as obstacles, it's the type of thing where you can't look 6 months or 10 months or a year down the road and say, what are our obstacles going to be? You have to sort of wake up in the morning and say, what are my obstacles today? And as I'm doing this interview right now, today, there really aren't that many obstacles, right? I mean, it's just a matter of just getting the work done and then seeing what happens. Now, the only real obstacle might be whether or not people avail themselves of the choices that we provide.
Now, one choice all of us could make, of course, is to buy the token which you've issued, RVP, Revolution Populi. We can all buy it through Uniswap. I had a look yesterday. The market cap is $21 million. So what would you advise people to do in relation to your token? Should we all be out there rushing and buying it? I don't know whether you're allowed to say that, but what have you achieved so far in terms of the money which you have raised? What have you been spending it on?
Yeah, I mean, so just to answer the first part of the question, our job is just to develop technology. It's going to be up to folks to either buy or not buy the token. That's orthogonal to what we're doing, to be candid, right? But we have obviously distributed a token, or we've released it, which and the reason why is, and this is very important, is that we believed and do believe that there needs to be a healthy distribution of the token before mainnet. Okay, that's the way the construct works, right? So that's the objective. The RVP token that's in the market today is sort of a placeholder token, okay? The real mainnet token will be the real token. But before you actually get into mainnet, you have to have some distribution of the token, because we're operating on what's called a version of the delegated proof of stake algorithm, which requires distribution and voting, okay? So that's effectively why we put the token into market now. But for right now, we're in testnet and we continue to advance the development. One of our recent releases, for instance, is that users now have the ability to vote, become the nodes that ultimately operate the blockchain. That's in testnet. And we've also implemented the ability for people to establish accounts, their own accounts on the blockchain, and make transfers. And all of the technology so far is operating quite well. It's stable and it's operating as intended.
And we can all join the revolution through the token. Now, your vision is nothing if not ambitious, to kind of overturn the Facebook plus others oligopoly. Raises some very obvious questions about the speed and the scalability of blockchain technology. Have you solved those problems?
Sort of. Yes, kind of. And here's the reason why. Okay, solve the problems. We have certainly understood from the jump that this was going to be something that we needed to pay attention to, right? Which is scalability. And so we've been extraordinarily disciplined to make sure that it is just a database with user controls. That's it, right? It's not meant to be a new internet. It's not meant to be, a new decentralized operating system or a new server network. And as a result, there's nothing really clogging the pipes, okay? And so therefore, it should operate fast. And so far, based upon the initial tests that we've done, it does. Again, preliminary tests, early tests, more wood to chop, all that other good stuff. But it's essentially showing that it can operate at over 100,000 transactions per second. Now that sounds like a lot, and it sounds very fast, and it is. But again, it's not meant to be a new internet. Okay, it's a database, so it ought to perform fast, and it does. And the objective there is to build a foundation, okay, a database foundation on top of which other services can be used, right? And any developer, because it's going to be an open system, will be free to use whatever technology stack they want to use in order to launch their services or their products. So for instance, if you want to use a centralized service like AWS, EC2 for your servers, you can. If you want to use the Internet Computer, which is a decentralized service, you ought to be able to, right? If for storage you want to use S3, you can use S3. If you want to use IPFS, you can use IPFS. And right now we're designing a universal gateway to allow that very thing. Right, to allow sort of a new foundation for hopefully a new internet economy, right? And so yeah, so we have thought about that from the get-go about scalability, and we believe that we've got a foundation for a very highly scalable kind of new economic foundation.
Now, one of the things I find interesting about your model, and I find this interesting about a lot of DeFi products and services, is it does provide this structural alternative to the centralized, hierarchically organized, limited liability joint stock company, the corporations, which, like Facebook, which kind of dominate our economic life today. And I'm old enough to remember the publication of Michael Jensen's famous article predicting the eclipse of the corporation. He was, of course, talking about companies going private, and to some extent that has happened. Lots of companies have delisted. What you're describing and what DeFi is mapping out for us in general is something much more revolutionary, a whole new type of organization, which is much more democratic than the traditional limited liability joint stock company. Do you think that we are in the early stages actually of a complete revolution in the types of organizations through which we work and through which we buy products and services?
It's a great question, and the only honest answer I can give is kind of no. and the reason why is, look, I think there's always going to be private enterprise, right? I believe Michael Jensen was suggesting that there was going to be this kind of, generally speaking, public corporations that operate publicly, and that there's going to be a series of sort of private contracts. Well, who are the private contracts going to be with? They're going to be with companies, right? And so, I don't know. I think that so long as there's going to be the rule of law, and let's hope that there always will be, and so long as there's going to be free market capitalism, I think that there should be some form of limited liability companies for people who are willing to take risks. Now, joint stock and all that other stuff and the structures, some of that might certainly, I think will likely change around the edges. But for all intents and purposes, laws and structures that limit the liability of people willing to take risks aren't really the issue, in my view. Okay, we want more people to become entrepreneurs. We want more people to have, control over their own destinies, and we want to lower the barriers so that we can allow people to do that. We want to have laws that protect them, for the risks that they take. This technology, I think, is in my view a different kind of creative destruction. Okay, but if you think about it, all creative destructions have been a different kind of creative destruction. That's the whole point of the creative side of it. So, but I think that the technology is going to really change the way that we operate within the internet economy, for sure. Do I think that decentralized autonomous organizations are going to change the legal structure of a bakery? No. But do I think that it's going to be that they have got a really powerful and new and different place, when it comes to, the software technology that interconnects, a data economy? Absolutely. And do I think that that's going to have a profound impact on, on the world and the economies of the world? Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now, to go back to the revolution side of Revolution Populi, the revolutions we always think of, like the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, were led by these small groups of fanatics. They knew what was best for the vast mass of people, and they kind of imposed it on them. The revolution you've described clearly entails mass participation, from quite an early stage. Now, what makes you confident? And I have this conversation quite a lot of the time with people who say, well, the masses will never get involved because they like free email and they like free social media platforms, and they're happy to give up their privacy for that. What makes you confident that actually you can get the masses to recognize that the loss of data control and data privacy is sufficiently alarming for them to want to give up free email and free social networks?
Well, let me answer the question a little bit differently. It's not our job to get people to do something. Our job is to give people the tools. Okay, and from there, it's up to them. That's the way real revolutions take hold, like the American Revolution. Give people the tools, give people the option, give people the choice, and then they either avail themselves of it or they do not. But without the tools, we're all lost and we're all subservient. So it starts with the tools, and that's our job. That's what we're here to try and do, right? Everything else is going to be up to the people. It just will be. It has to be, otherwise it's just not going to work. So what makes me confident that people will do it is because it's kind of a no-brainer. If you give them the tools, or if you provide the foundation for the tools, I believe people will build on that foundation. And if people build on that foundation, and then you give people an option to say, hey, would you like to control the information that belongs to you? Would you like to have control over your own property? Would you like to be able to monetize it or determine personally who gets to get paid by it if you choose? Or do you want to just continue to do things the way that you've been doing them? And if you give people a choice between, I guess, freedom and captivity, I believe just generally the human condition will choose freedom, but you got to give them a choice.
Mm-hmm. So if we give people a choice and we give them the tools, how difficult is it going to be for them in your model to exercise that choice and use their tools? And let me be specific about this.
Sure.
Will we need a new type of intermediary, somebody who's going to provide a service to consumers to enable them to control their data, to own their data, and to decide who gets to use it and decide how they, if and when and by what means they get paid for the use of their data, and indeed their data being used to fulfill transactions, whether it's getting a passport or getting their supermarket shopping. Do you need a new type of intermediary to work with? It seems to be impossible that all consumers are going to want to do this themselves. Will they want to buy services from some type of intermediary to do it for them?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question. The answer is absolutely. Well, we certainly believe there will be. Again, the whole point of the core of data sovereignty, this simple, elegant idea of a distributed and universally distributed and decentralized database, is that it's the core. It's a core upon which other things can be built. But you need to provide people with the core, okay? But clearly, if you provide an open framework for entrepreneurs to come in, and there is a demand, somebody's going to meet the supply, right? Or somebody's going to match the supply with the demand. That's a classic broker model, okay? If there is supply and there is demand, somebody's going to come in, and hopefully more than one, hopefully more than many, right? That say, okay, we're going to match somebody who's got data that wants to sell it to people who want to buy it, and we're going to take a vig, okay? That's classic broker market model. That's classic market making model. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be all sorts of opportunities for those kinds of intermediaries, let's call them data markets, okay, to come to be within this hopefully new economy that's based upon, data sovereignty. It's a great question, though, and I think it cuts to the notion that, again, what we're building is a core upon which other things can be built, right? And that will, and the sort of North Star is data sovereignty about that core.
Something else we're very keen on at Future of Finance is digital identities. And we're greatly puzzled that something which, on the face of it, should be able to save existing financial institutions tens of billions of dollars in running know your customer, anti-money laundering, counting the financing of terrorism, sanctions screening checks. Yep. They're all throwing people and money at these problems and duplicating work. But we're very puzzled that digital identities don't seem to be getting traction. Why do you think that is question one. And question two is, are they a central part of your own vision of the future of data sovereignty?
Also fantastic question. The answer to the second part is yes. Undeniably yes. First part. So, well, again, there's no decentralized database for it. Okay. What we're building, right? There's no decentralized, universally distributed, decentralized database with user controls. That's why. Look, if everyone had their own account on a blockchain, their own sort of mini blockchain, so to speak, which is exactly what the design that we're building toward, and they alone have the keys, okay, then why not be able to provide your sensitive personal information just once on the blockchain? There's absolutely no reason why that can't be done. Right now, okay, let's say right now you've got a bank account, a traditional brokerage account, and you're interested in buying and selling cryptocurrency. So you've signed up for 3 exchanges, because you kind of have to sign up to more than one if you want to get best price or best execution, right? So that's 5 different places that you've had to hand over all of your sensitive information to, okay? And that means that there are 5 different organizations with 5 different ways to manage security, okay? 5 different ways to manage their compliance, 5 different levels of executives who have access to that information, or maybe junior people who have access to that information, okay? So that also is kind of a big problem, and we are absolutely confident that a structure like this can undeniably solve that problem, and that's something that's clearly we've given a lot of thought to, especially given candidly my background in financial services and market infrastructure.
Now, your white paper contains something unexpected, and personally I thought it was very interesting. I hadn't seen it anywhere else. This is the idea of a cryptocurrency clearinghouse. This would be underwritten by a guarantee fund, which would be an income yielding guarantee fund that would belong to the users, and consumers could novate their counterparty risk to it. In other words, it's like a central counterparty clearinghouse, but in this data sovereignty marketplace which you're creating. And I was puzzled when I first looked at it. I thought, well, CCPs get this criticism of being, centralizers and concentrators of risk. What was the thinking that persuaded you that a clearinghouse had a big role to play in your model?
Also, outstanding question. So first, I recognize that there's a problem in the crypto markets, that the trades aren't guaranteed cross ledger. Okay, and also that institutions aren't coming in. They're not. I mean, let's just face facts. They're not. And candidly, I know this sounds a little bit whatever, maybe naive, but it's not. It's very well founded. The reason why they're not, you can give like 1,000 reasons, but the core reason, in my view, and it's not anecdotal, I've done a lot of research on this, is because candidly, the trades are not guaranteed. Okay, money, and I've been told this over and over and over again. All right, money managers are not uncomfortable with volatile markets. Right, that's what they do for a living. Right, they manage money for their clients. If every market was predictable, a money manager wouldn't have a job. All right, so they are not only not uncomfortable with it, that's how they make their living. Okay, so clearly it's not the volatility of the markets that bothers money managers. But no trade guarantees, they cannot and will not abide. Okay, because who's on the hook? Who's on the hook? It's a disaster waiting to happen. Right, so I'll give you I'll tell this little story. I've got a friend I've known for probably close to 20 years now. She runs the institutional sales side of a big institution that's got a crypto arm. Okay, and that crypto arm does things like custody and execution and prime brokerage. She said to me that she's on the phone all day every day with institutions, including people from the other arm of her shop. And she said to me, look, every time I speak to these guys, every second question is there any insurance? Are the trades guaranteed? And if the trades aren't guaranteed, they say, well, come back to me when they are. All right. So this is a real issue to get to really expand the user community of cryptocurrency, which is a real issue for the technology. Okay, if we want this technology to sustain itself and to advance itself, you need to have thriving cryptocurrency markets, which means you need to have some market infrastructure to provide stability. So that's number one. I definitely saw when I started to talk about what I'm doing with friends and colleagues. I mean, that was just like a lot of incoming about that. And it also turns out that the layer one blockchain that we are developing, the decentralized layer one blockchain, is perfectly suited to solve the problem. It's an atomic record keeper, which is effectively most of what a clearinghouse is and does, right? Or at least certainly a massive component of what it does. So to answer the question directly, there are really three reasons. One, building a blockchain database that's perfectly suited to it. Two, and this is really important, and this is really sort of the selling point in my own mind for myself. Apologize to getting a little schizophrenic, but it provides another use case for the core blockchain, for that core economy that's completely different from a social network. Almost the whole point is to make it so widely different, so orthogonal to a social network. So now you got two initial proofs of concept that can prove the universality of a blockchain. If you've got a clearinghouse and a social net construct that's using the damn thing, you can pretty much assume that anything is going to be able to be used on top of it. And then lastly, I've got candidly personal expertise and background in the space and access to other people with expertise and background who want to do it. Like, I believe you've spoken to Gary Chang, who's from JP Morgan, who's an advisor on the clearinghouse side. So, if you think about it in those terms, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Rob, one last question for you. And it's a rather a greedy one, really, because you've been very clear in outlining what your vision is, and it's a grand vision and it's an ambitious one. But what are the limits to this?
It's an achievable one, though. It's an achievable one. It's very important. Yeah. Everyone says that it's ambitious, and it is, but it's also achievable.
Okay. What are the limits to it? What are the limits to data sovereignty? What's the economy that we're going to live in? And when we all enjoy, just imagine we get there, you've achieved it, we're all enjoying data sovereignty. What's that economy actually going to look like? do you think?
Well, that's a good question. So I think that first of all, we need to get accustomed to the idea that the way that we exist today within the current economic structure of the internet is going to change. Okay, the internet is still embryonic. It's not that old, and the state of doing things is just going to change because it's going to have to. The data capture model just doesn't work. It just doesn't. I mean, it works for the companies, right? But it doesn't work for society, and it doesn't work for humanity. So it has to change. Okay. The only thing constant in life is change. Okay. So I think what you're going to see is, again, a new sort of internet economy where people are going to have an opportunity to monetize their daily lives, right? Imagine if all of us had homes that sat on top of oil. Okay, so you'll have this little sort of derrick that can produce oil for you on a daily basis. I mean, that's the best sort of that's the best I can kind of come up with. And moreover, just control the information that belongs to you, so that it's not manipulated by other people. Those two alone are going to be massive shifts, massive economic shifts, right? I think it's estimated somewhere between 7 and the data market is or data is valued at somewhere between 7 and 13 trillion dollars. It's a lot of cake. And if only like 2 or 3 guys have it versus the rest of humanity, it's a big shift.
Rob Rosenthal, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.